All right, let's get right into it. When you look at a world map, some countries just seem to be in the perfect spot. And India is definitely one of them. But is having that kind of prime real estate on the globe always a good thing? Today we're going to dig into the huge strategic importance of India's location and why it might just be a classic double-edged sword.
So, let me start with a question for you. Ever stop and think about why an entire ocean, the Indian Ocean, is named after just one country? No other country in the world has that. Well, the answer, as we're about to find out, is all about its unique geography. A placement that's given it some incredible advantages, but also some pretty serious challenges.
So to really get a handle on this, let's start with the big picture. We're going to see how India's position puts it in a commanding role for global trade, basically making it the center of the world.
Okay, so the first point is really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. If you just look at the continent of Asia, you'll see the Indian landmass sits right smack in the middle. It's this central piece that connects East and West Asia. It's not off to the side somewhere, it's totally front and center.
And you know what? That central spot is even more critical when you look at the sea. What you're seeing here are the trans-Indian Ocean routes. Think of them as the superhighways for ships, connecting Europe with all of East Asia. And notice what's sitting right at that pivotal point in the middle? Yep, India. It's been that way for centuries, and it's still true today.
So, how exactly does that work? Well, just look at the shape of the country. That big triangle, the Deccan Peninsula, juts out into the ocean like a massive wedge. This gives it two totally separate coastlines. From the west coast, it's a straight shot over to West Asia, Africa, and Europe. And from the east coast, that opens up everything in Southeast and East Asia. It's like a natural two-way gateway to the world.
And then, boom! In 1869, something happened that made this location even more strategic. The Suez Canal opened. And this one event cut the sea journey between India and Europe by a mind-blowing 7,000 kilometers. For the British Empire, this was a total game-changer. It didn't just shorten the trip, it cemented India's role as the crown jewel of their empire, basically supercharging all the trade routes that revolved around it.
Okay, so we've looked at the global view. Now let's zoom in a little bit. Let's take a tour of the immediate neighborhood and look at the countries India actually shares a border with, both on the land and across the sea. So, if we start up in the northwest, India's got land borders with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Then, as we move north and east, you run into that huge border with China, and you've got Nepal and Bhutan kind of nestled right there in the Himalayas. This is a geography that has, for centuries, defined politics and history in the region.
So here's the full lineup. India shares a land border with 7 countries. Over in the east, you've got Myanmar and Bangladesh. Then, if you look across the water, its closest neighbors are Sri Lanka, down to the southeast, and the Maldives to the southwest. And here's something important to remember. 3 of its neighbors, Afghanistan, Nepal, and Bhutan, are landlocked. That means their access to the ocean heavily depends on their relationship with India.
All right, let's crunch some numbers. Let's look at a few of the key stats and lines on the map that give India its unique scale, its shape, and even its climate.
This chart really gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about. The land boundary is just huge, over 15,000 kilometers long. But what's really incredible is the coastline. Including the islands, it's over 7,500 kilometers. In fact, India has the longest coastline of any country on the Indian Ocean. And that, right there, brings us back to why that whole ocean is named after it.
Now, here's another key line that defines India, the Tropic of Cancer. It cuts right across the middle of the country. And this isn't just some abstract line on a map, it has very real-world effects. It basically splits the country into 2 different climate zones. The southern half is in the tropics, and the northern half is in what's called the warm temperate zone. And that diversity is key to everything from its farming to its culture.
So, how do you set the time for a country that's almost 3,000 kilometers wide from one side to the other? Well, you pick a line. The standard meridian, at 82.5 degrees east longitude, runs right down the center of the country. And this line is what's used to set Indian Standard Time, or IST. It's what makes sure all the clocks from the far east to the far west are all in sync.
So we've seen all the advantages, right? The central location, the massive coastline. But this brings us all the way back to our main question. Is India's location a pure, simple blessing? Or is it a little more complicated? Let's really explore this idea of it being a double-edged sword.
This quote from our source material just nails it. On the one hand, its location made it a powerhouse for global trade throughout history. But, on the other hand,
The very same things, those towering Himalayas in the north and the huge ocean in the south, they also acted like walls, basically trapping Indian empires within the subcontinent.
Let's break that down a bit more. The positives, they're pretty obvious. That central position fueled massive trade, like the ancient spice routes that connected India all the way to the Roman Empire. But the negatives are just as important. Those same natural barriers, for instance, pretty much limited how far empires like the Mauryan or the Mughal could expand. It was really hard for them to project power beyond the subcontinent. So these barriers created a very distinct, but also a somewhat isolated world.
So as you can see, India's location gives it these incredible strategic benefits, but it also comes with some heavy historical baggage. It's really a classic case of geography as destiny. That has absolutely defined its past. But the final question we're left with is this. In a world of airplanes and satellites and the internet, for how much longer will these geographic advantages and these limits continue to define its future?